Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to Professor Raimo Puustinen, who is going to enlighten us today on the topic of signs, symptoms and interactions, creating meaning in medical consultation. His performance will be about a half an hour long, which will be followed by a discussion. So please enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here to give this lecture. I'm very honored to come here and deliver this talks with you today. But before I start, how many physicians or medical students are there? And non-physicians, don't be afraid. Non-physicians, very good. Because it always gets a bit boring if there are only physicians around. It's good to have people from other subjects here for the discussion to follow. My background is a physician and general practitioner with 30 years of experience of clinical primary health care in Finland and partly elsewhere. I've done my postgraduate training mostly in Britain, first at the University of Wales, Swansea, and then at University of Durham in Northern England, which I will refer to a bit more at the end of my speech. So my topic today is to examine some very fundamental issues in medicine, especially in medical practice. Very fundamental, at least to me. And I will start with 4 sentences from a very eminent textbook of medicine. And let us first consider these 2 sentences. To put it in simple terms, my work, as for all of us physicians, is a patient approaches me with all kinds of complaints and symptoms and worries, and I have to think, what is this all about? And now the problem is that patients often present all kinds of confusing symptoms. You know, I feel so tired, I have these pains, you know, I feel so dizzy. And they don't understand what is going on. And this is precisely why they are approaching a physician to find understanding, meaning, what is this that is bothering me? This is why they're seeing. And then, after I have listened to my patient's complaints, I examine my patient. Just take off your shirt, it's not here now. And then I take a look. And more often than not, I'm able to see some signs or touch them. And observe bodily, objective physical signs together with the complaints, the symptoms that she is presenting to me. But not always they are visible. I have to apply some very simple methods like auscultation or X-rays or laboratory tests to find more about non-visible physical signs to end up with diagnosis. These sentences were written more than 2,000 years ago in Hippocratic writings on the art of medicine, which indicates that the very fundamental issues in medical practice are still the same. How do we create meaning? How do we create understanding with the patient during the consultation? Not just very few minutes of consultation. So we have here 4 issues, 4 fundamental concepts in medicine: science, symptoms, knowledge, and reason. So let us start with the problem of science. We live in a world filled with things and science. This is a thing. It's not a science, it's a thing. Things refer only to themselves. This is just a bottle of water. But that is a sign. And there is a sign. There are a lot of signs all around us. Signs are things that refer to something else outside of themselves. So when we ask, what does this mean? It takes us straight to the very core problem of human understanding, the problem of meaning. What do we mean with meaning? In English language, the verb mean means to signify. It refers directly to the phenomena of this referring to the other. It's a relational concept. What do you mean? And I have to explain what do I refer to with what I've said. But the noun mean in English language is something in between, indicating precisely the same phenomena. That is always a matter of this referring to that, and that creates meaning. I'll give you a couple of examples to make the point. Is this a sign? Would anyone consider this is a sign? Probably not. There are just two things. Two black bars on a white screen. It's not a sign, it's just things. But let's see what happens when we move them around a bit. Is this a sign? For all of us who are familiar with Christendom, it definitely is a sign. All of a sudden, it opens up a whole world of issues, ideas, experiences. Now, it is a sign for all of us who are familiar with this. And to see the power and the effect of signs on our thinking and our emotions, I'll show you a couple of more examples when we play a little bit with the idea of the cross. Now, for all of you here who are familiar with the Eastern Orthodox Church, you can almost smell, for instance. You can hear the chanting, you see the icons, and the whole thing that's going on here. It's all so different than what we had in this Lutheran singing. Another one. If you reflect, how does this affect you? Now your thoughts go to another way. This is another strong symbol. A subdivision of signs. And one more. See how it affects you. It's something you don't want to deal with. I hope so anyway. So this is how signs function. They open up whole words. They refer to something else. So, from a theoretical point of view, what can we make out of this? And in current semiotic theory, for some reason that has escaped, we have three approaches to the issue of sign, which I prefer to call dyadic, triadic, and dialogic. This dyadic idea of sign is rather familiar for many of you, I'm sure, developed by Swiss linguist Ferdinand de Saussure more than 100 years ago. Well, his idea of a sign is boiled into the language, the sound image. I mean, word is a sign for excellence. There's no more powerful signs we have than words. Sound image refers to something else, but in this case to an idea of something, not necessarily to concrete things. Like when I say horse, that refers to the idea of the big animal, forks, etc. And in medical terms, when we use the word expression, verbal expression, psoriasis, it refers to the idea of a certain skin condition. Now, one feels a bit uncomfortable with this idea of sign. It's kind of too simplistic in terms of medicine. So what? We may say that psoriasis refers to skin condition. What can we make of that? Not much, really, in my opinion. So it seems we need something more. Then we have this triadic idea of science, developed by American philosopher Charles Sanders Peirce, again more than 100 years ago, when the sign constitutes of three things. There is the physical of the representative, this refers to that, as previously, but we cannot sort of make sense of it without a third, a referent, sort of a system through which we decipher these relations. And this triadic thing sort of creates the semiosis, the whole phenomenon of creating meaning. This is especially important, in my opinion, in terms of scientific words, ideas, concepts. And when I speak of concepts from now on, I want to emphasize that I'm not talking about ideas, as in English language, concept can be understood as an idea. I'm talking about concept as concrete verbs. As concrete verbs. It comes more closer to the German term Begriff. It's not etwas zu greifen. It's very concrete, talking about verbs. And in scientific language, verbs, concepts, are more than verbs. They are not just words. They are scientific concepts carry the whole theory with them. When we use certain concepts in science, they become scientific only through being in a relation to other concepts within that scientific system, theoretical system. I'll give you a couple of examples. In his very opening page of Newton's Principia, he does not open his book with mathematical formulas. He opens it with words. He opens the whole thing through defining the very basic concepts he used. And he defines the word mass through density and bulk conjunctly. And from that on, throughout the book, the concept mass can be understood only and only through that relation. And this is a beautiful example to me of how scientific concepts are created, that they have to fit into other concepts within the system in order to be scientific. In everyday language, we can play around with words. Poetry is an example, the best example for that. But in science, we cannot do that. If you take out word mass and give other meanings in physics than this, it's not a physics, it's not a scientific term anymore. It's something else. We do that all the time, especially in medicine, but that's another issue. Another example. For Darwin, in this very front page of his book, he uses the concept of species, selection. There are very particular concepts to build up the whole theory of modern biology, which is based on the concept of evolution. If we take the concept of evolution out of modern biology, the whole thing will collapse. So this indicates to me how important it is that scientific concepts are solid within the system we use them. Now let's go back to medicine. As we saw before, in Saussure's treatment of science, it's just a word indicating an idea. But through this first idea, we can understand psoriasis in modern medicine only and only through cellular pathology. As you see in the front cover of the textbooks of psoriasis, what do we have here? We have cells. When we address human body in modern medicine, we address human body with biological concept through the cellular theory. And that makes psoriasis a scientific concept in medical terms. But how does that come about? I mean, where does that come from? How did you end up calling this thing psoriasis and writing a book about it? They don't come out of the blue. And as Peirce says, nothing is a sign unless it is interpreted as a sign. And this brings us to the third level of developing and using science, that we need human agent acting in this phenomenon. I'll give you an example. This is a thing, and this is a thing. They are not signs. But all things can become signs through human dialogue. For example, before we started, I gave these 2 bottles to her and asked her that when I have 5 minutes left, to push this a little bit here. And when I have 2 minutes left, push this a little bit here. Now they became signs through human dialogue. And this brings us to the idea of dialogic sign, developed Russian philosopher of language, Bakhtin, Voloshinov, among others, again, more than 100 years ago. And the whole idea is that signs don't just come out of the blue. They are the result of human communication. They are words, signs, they are tools for our thinking that are developed the way we interact with each other. And it's a developmental phenomenon in the sense when a child is born into this world, he or she always is born into a certain semiotic system, certain language environment, in certain period of time, in certain cultural context. And when he or she develops, she acquires this system of signs through which she interacts with the world. And in the science, when we come up with a problem that we cannot solve with the tools we have to develop new tools to address this phenomenon by developing new scientific concepts. And it can be said, like Vygotsky has written, that in fact, science develops through developing concepts. Science is not something that we just make measurements and gather data. And the more we gather data, we think that, well, now we do more science. No, this is not the case. Science develops through developing concepts. Give an example which I think is a beautiful example in medicine. It's been obvious for writers since antiquity that certain diseases are contagious. We have those writings from the Hippocratic area. It's obvious. I mean, this is contagious. And we have even speculations in the antiquity that there must be small, minute creatures living in the world we cannot see, which transmit the disease. And it was only in the 19th century when that was proved to be the case. Since the late 17th century, we had actually saw those creatures. And the early 19th century, hundreds of bacteria, so small animalcula, had been categorized already. But when it was shown that it is those little creatures that when taken from here, put them to you, will get sick. Sorry. And we developed this idea of infectious disease, but then came a problem. We had people carrying that germ. I mean, quite a few people here, if you put it in your throats, will find streptococci in some of your throats, but you are not ill. So what do we make of that? Now we encounter a phenomena that we never had before. Actually, I thought of it. And we had to develop a new concept, immunity, and to develop a whole field of research, immunology, with its own conceptual devices from phagocytosis, etc., to deal with this phenomena when they're trying to figure out what is going on. And this is how science, how medicine developed. Now, that's for the theoretical part. Let us now see how this works in a GP's consultation room, in my own opinion. Now, we have symptoms and we have signs. Why don't we just speak of science in medicine? Why do we have these two terms, science and symptoms? In medical literature, since the antiquity, and if you take any medical textbook today, you'll find the definition that symptom is something that the patient has. We all have symptoms. Stiff neck and some acidity here and headache and whatever. We all have symptoms. Basically every day. Some guesses. But we can deal with them. But when you bring them to a doctor, it's not always sufficient to deal with some symptoms only. It is possible. For example, if a patient comes to me and says, I have this recurrent headaches on the other side of my head, and before they start, I have to do some funny visions blurring in my eyes, and then I have this terrible headache, and then I have to lay down in a dark room and cover my eyes and suffer for 8 hours, and then it goes away. And it comes and goes. Well, those are symptoms. And I can tell the patient, well, you're suffering from migraine. We can make a diagnosis on symptoms alone. Hemicrania, half L in the antiquity. Hemicrania, micrania, migraine, migraine. But more often than not, it's not enough good diagnosis with symptoms alone. If the patient says, I feel so tired all the time, this and that and that, we need science. We need something more. And this is precisely why we need to examine the patient. This is again from the Hippocratic writings. Reason from the symptoms. But symptom becomes a medical sign only when interpreted through medical theory, like in the case of migraine. So whenever we listen to our patients, we sort of look them through a prism. In the patient talks, we have this prism of medical theory. And we'll see if it fits in. If it doesn't fit in, then we are a bit in trouble. And what is medical theory? If the patient says, I have this funny pain here, we are not thinking as physicians, oh, you have been afflicted by an evil eye. It's still a common explanation for many conditions throughout the world. Evil eye causing this. But it's not part of the medical theory, so it doesn't fit in. So we need more. And again, from Hippocratic writings, science may be revealed by certain harmless methods known to those practiced into science. So we have the knowledge of the medical theory, and we just sort of bring them up, we elicit the science. And nowadays, we can do, it says certain harmless measures, we can do some rather drastic diagnostic procedures today, which are not only uncomfortable, but can be harmful. But that's another matter. So it's nice and clean. Symptoms and science and reasoning through medical theory. So simple. But in a GP surgery, at least in Finland, and I'm quite convinced that also here we have this problem. We have patients coming on a daily basis that it doesn't fit. The symptoms don't make sense. There are no signs we can elicit. And the patient is sitting there and complaining, I feel so bad, doctor, help me do something. And we don't have a diagnosis. And these people just keep coming back. How do we deal with this in modern medicine? We like to put things in order because medicine is science and science things in order. So we create new diagnoses to fit these in somehow. Like, do you have this diagnosis here, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, panic disorder? Everybody has depression. Finland, at least nowadays, you don't have depression. And then we just, the umbrella diagnosis is, well, it's psychosomatic. You don't really have anything inside. You have psychosomatic. Yeah, that's okay. What you do. But there's a problem here. That when we say psychosomatic, what do we actually say? First of all, is it a scientific concept? To me, it's not. Because we have a nice theory on somatic things, that is anatomy and physiology based on biological concepts and methods. But where is the psyche? Do we have a scientific valid theory on psyche? I haven't heard. If someone has, please tell me, where is our theory of psyche? Which is scientifically valid. So it's an empty term. Apart from its being non-scientific term, it's sort of diminishing the patient. You are not really sick. You just think you are sick. But I'm sick. I feel so lousy. And the doctor is telling me there's nothing wrong with you. And there's a third aspect to this, that it's dangerous. Absolutely dangerous. And this happens. So now we have a problem in medical theory. How do we deal with this problem? Now we have two options. Is there something wrong with medicine as a theoretical system? Or are they just crazy people we don't need to worry about? There's nothing wrong with our theory, it's just that people are wrong. And this is how we often tend to think, oh, they're just crazy, complaining, we don't have to worry about that. But there is a genuine issue to me, and not only to me. More than 30 years ago, Thomas and Pellegrino wrote in the fabulous book, A Philosophical Basis for Medical Practice, they proposed that medicine must begin questioning its conceptual framework. Conceptual framework. What are basic concepts that we use when we build medical theory? Are those concepts only in the cellular physiology or pathology, or are they somewhere else? And they propose that to examine medicine as a theoretical system, the starting point is interhuman even, the relationship between the physician and the patient. The very relationship where the meaning is created with signs and symptoms through a dialogue. Because in those fleeting moments, we decide, where does this go? Do you end up on a surgeon's table when you shouldn't be there? Or you don't end up there where you should be there? And those are the precious moments when meaning is created, and that meaning leads to somewhere. Most of them satisfactory results, but too often unsatisfactory results. So what goes on here? What goes on in those moments? What is the conceptual system we actually use? How do we generate the meaning during the consultation? And now we face a problem. Because medicine, we in medicine, we consider medicine as being part of natural sciences. Because when we address the human body, we use scientific methods, biological methods to be sure. But can we study this phenomena by using biological methods and concepts? No. Biology doesn't take us anywhere here, because biology doesn't examine this phenomena. It's none of its business. So it makes one wonder. But what is the role of the humanities in medicine? And if it is so that the consultation is the very core event, everything is built upon this meeting between the physician and the patient, then should we say that in fact medicine as a science belongs to the humanities and not to the natural sciences? Well, the natural sciences, to be sure, they give us tools to understand the human body and how it's built and how it functions, how can it be fixed up. But all the rest, we deal with our patients. It doesn't give us any tools. But humanities, if we learn to use them in medicine, and not just learn to use them. So the question is, approaching to the end now, that can it be done that the humanities are taking into the core of medicine to explore these phenomena? Should it be done? And now comes the commercial part of this presentation. I have had the privilege to work with scholars at the Durham University in Northern England, and we just finished our series of books, 4 books, where we look at medicine from the humanities point of view through 4 different stages. We start with the symptom, asking, what are we talking about when we are talking about symptoms? Because we all have symptoms, but we don't end up seeing physicians every day. So when somebody comes in with the symptoms, what is going on? And the second book is the diagnosis. Now we are talking about her symptoms, and we end up with diagnosis. How did we end up there? What is diagnosis anyway? What are we talking about? And then when we reach the diagnosis, perhaps we should do something about this condition, and we end up prescribing treatment. So what is it actually we are treating when we treat our patients? What are we talking about treatment? And then when the patient leaves the room, the consultation doesn't end when the patient leaves the room. It doesn't end there. My responsibility as a physician goes beyond the door, up to the point when the patient is cured or sees some other physician. So what happens after that? And there are 10 physicians, they are all, believe it or not, they're all physicians, practicing physicians right here. We have only one philosopher. And the philosopher, Professor Martin Evans from Durham, is part of the theme because he's the only one who can make thoughts straight. We have had fantastic meetings with him. I keep talking 30 minutes, I have this idea. And he says, you mean this? And then in one sentence, yeah, This is what I mean. I think it's beautiful. We need philosophers in medicine. And this is about, I was hoping to introduce you to today, and now we have time, I hope, for discussion to develop these themes further, if you so prefer. Thank you.